If you want to lose weight, you want and you need ways to measure fat and body composition, not tracking too little or tracking the wrong or unnecessary information can lead you down a path where you might lose muscle and ultimately then, because you do, will regain more weight because of it. So this episode of Flipping 50 lays out many methods, 9, either believed or used, literally, to measure fat. This is the good, the bad, and the in-between. You may find an additional tool you want to use, and you will find some resources to make it easy to do that. You may find you want an upgrade to what you're doing now. Let's dive into these 9 ways to measure fat and body composition that I've included here. And I'm going to pause for a shameless plug. Right now, as I'm releasing this, we're getting quickly toward the end of February 2022. So if you're not listening then, stay tuned because it is still so very applicable and we need this information. Women over 50, more than it ever before, because we didn't get this. And there may be a gap in what you're doing and learned once and really truly need now. But this is the month when we talk heart health. We also talk, because of that, about fat. For women who go through menopause, starting in perimenopause, gaining weight around the belly, that visceral belly fat. And, it's different than, say, pinch an inch. And yet that's also not great, but internally surrounding your organs, that visceral belly fat contributes to heart disease, as well as many other diseases and comorbidities that come with obesity. And you need to stay on top of that, girlfriend. This is not just your jeans don't fit, your waistband is tight, you're uncomfortable or not confident. And all of those things are 100% important, by the way. But this is life and death. It truly is. So really take this seriously. And if you're listening and someone you know and love and you want to play with you in your 80s and 90s, you got to share this. So we are beyond, hopefully, the mean girl times in our lives where we get information, we hoard information because we don't want someone else to get good information. Why would we do that? The more you spread it, the more you talk about it, the more we have conversations, the more we point all of us in the right direction sooner, faster, more efficiently. So let's do that. Flipping 50's Fit You program is created for women who have 20 or more pounds to lose. So yes, if you have 18 or 19, it's not quite 20. Yes, it's for you. It's different to lose weight, number one, when you're over 40 or you're in menopause. Definitely over 50, it changes. Not because your metabolism does. Scientifically, we know that's not true, but it may have slowed because of the habits that you're doing or not doing. And it's different when you have 20 or more to lose, not just, you've gained 5 or 10 by that transition into menopause, which is somewhat evolution on your side. I'm not going to go into that at the moment. But now is the time to get it. You can get it for 50% off. You can also get this month the Metabolism Makeover course. When I did that live, and actually this was in pandemic, we didn't even know it was going to be a pandemic. It just was in the works and I was producing it. And when we first sold it, it was a value of $6.99. And so you're getting the recordings, not me live. So there's a little potentially less value in that, but you get all of that plus the course at 50% off right now. And I'm in there every single week in that private Facebook group. You have access to the videos. Weekly, I, on a plate, say to you, here you go. I want you to do these interval workouts on these days. I want you to do these strength training workouts on these days. And we talk nutrition, we talk mindset, we talk what else you might want to be thinking about. But mindset is such a very big and important piece of changing what you're doing or hoping to change your weight. All right, Let's dive in right now. I'm going to start with 4 ways to measure fat that are the most common, the most well-known. Number 1, the traditional scale. You know the one, the needle bouncing. It's where we get that. My needle bouncing here and there. It tells you your weight. That's what it is. And the pros, I'm going to give you pros and cons of each. So the pros are it's convenience, right? It's at home. You probably already have one. It's affordable. It tells change, even if it's not correctly calibrated. Anybody else recognize that? It's like you measure on your scale every single day at home, then you go to the doctor and it's like you're either heavier or lighter. So you're depressed or related because of that. And it doesn't really matter. What you're doing is you need to compare apples to apples always, or oranges to oranges. And you want to make sure that it's the same calibration, that you don't change it. So you're seeing steady change. So, okay, we can do that with your scale. The cons of a scale: it does not measure body composition. So that weight on the scale could be now more fat than it ever was, but you don't know that because you're not getting any look under the hood. Doesn't tell you muscle and fat, and the calibration could be entirely wrong. And if that's a big deal for you, it's not for me. Change is what I want to see. But that's traditional scales. Girth measurements, which is, I think girth is such an ugly word. I don't know who made that up, but girth measurements. So typically these are taken at the calf, the thigh, the hip, the waist, the chest, the shoulder, and the triceps. And traditionally we've done like all right side, unless there is a reason. It doesn't matter if you are a left-handy. But if there is some reason why we would want to do it on both sides, or that we can't for some reason, maybe a limb loss would be a reason. The pros of girth measurements: it's convenient, it's affordable, combined with weight-only scales, gives you an insight into body composition. So we've got the scale at home. We've probably got a tape measure at home. It's probably pretty easy to do the 2 of those, not too time-consuming, and that gives you some insight. So I used to call that, I should call it woman's, but I used to call it poor man's scale, poor man's body composition. If you know this, then we've got more information than simply scale alone. The cons of girth measurements: inaccuracies can occur from the pre to the post testing. They can occur from just, doing it once and then immediately doing it again. Subjective errors by you're either pulling tighter or you have a looser hold than you did. There are placement variations. So imagine you're trying to go around your calf at the biggest point. You're trying to go around your hip at the biggest point. If you don't have that tape measure parallel to the floor, exactly. And that's a variation that when you do it next time, it's probably, you're not going to reroute exactly where you were. So there's little margin of error there, probably all the time. Some of the ways that we avoid this, and I will repeat myself here because we do it in many, many ways. But when I was taking measurements, this was as an undergrad is when I first started doing this. So one semester we had to do this. We did it on each other. We practice, and then we had to kind of test out as a practical. We were testing, this is how we do it. And then as a grad student, I had an assistantship working for the university's exercise clinic in the lab. And as part of that, every beginning of the semester, end of the semester, we were a research lab and department. We had to pre and post test everybody to see how did they do. And so I did a lot of girth measurements, a lot of Skinfold calipers, a lot of everything related to fitness testing. So what we would do is at each site, we would take 3 measurements, record, average of those. And ideally, when I was in grad school, then we would take one of those undergrad students in our class and say, okay, add these 3 up. And then each student had to do it for the one behind them. And it went a lot faster than me having to do all of it. But that's probably the best way for you to do it too. So if you're doing it standing in front of your mirror, you're doing it solo, you take 3 at your calf, record each one, divide them by 3. There's your average, probably more accurate this way. The next is body mass index. Now, BMI for many of you is something that you confuse with body composition. They're different. They're not the same. BMI is body mass index. It is using your height and your weight. A BMI rating places you in the ideal or not of 19 to 24 is generally ideal. Now, you'll find if you Google, you're going to find a lot of answers to the same question. And this is no different. So it might be like 18.5, it'll suggest to 24.9, and that's going to be ideal range. Or you're below that, you're too low, or you're above that, above 24.9, you're at 25, that is too high. So lots of things that you want to consider, but here are the pros. It's simplistic. I mean, it requires no tools to do. You can go to an online calculator, your height and your weight, and boom, you can figure it out. What's wrong? The cons. There's zero indication of body composition again, right? There are outliers like frail older adults who weigh very little, and there are thick-framed, thick-boned, muscular but shorter in height individuals that will never have healthy BMI ranges, especially if they're more muscular, because muscle does weigh more than fat. It's more dense. So it's not a good indication of overall health. It is just kind of a bogus number, and yet doctors do still use it. So word of warning, you need to know what it is and what BMI is not. So my BMI currently is 22.3, and that's while I'm at the lowest body fat I've ever been as an adult, at a lower weight and yet higher percent of body fat. My BMI would be 21.6, right? So think about that. If I were at a lower weight and yet I had a higher percent body fat, my BMI would be more favorable, falsely giving me the impression I was healthier with those numbers. And the calculator is below. I'm putting a link in the show notes. If you've lost weight, you want to make sure that you've got the right numbers. Your BMI might improve. It might not if you're getting too low in body weight for your height. But this measure alone could have you chasing the wrong goal line, right? Running for the other team. Okay, and the fourth is waist to hip ratio. Now, this one has some merit. It measures clearly, as it states, your waist and your hip each at the smallest point, or waist at the smallest point. Let's say that, I'm sorry, and hip at the biggest point. And as it says, this is a measure of your proportions. So you divide the waist measurement by the hip measurement. Poor scores are indicative of greater risk for heart disease. There is a research-based correlation. 0.8 or lower is desirable for women, and above 0.85 is classified as abdominal obesity by the World Health Organization. So I want you to do that. Got a tape measure? So go into the bathroom so you can really see it. Where's the smallest point for your waist? Write that down. Go into the bathroom, look at the biggest point of your hips, the biggest width of your hips, and probably that's where your bum is also kind of going to be the biggest and broadest. And then divide your waist, the smaller of the two, by your hip measurement. What do you get? Should be 0.8 or lower, ideally. So pros is super convenient, right? It's easy to calculate. It tells you not just how much fat, it doesn't tell you it literally, but it does tell you where you carry it. So if you're able to measure it somewhere else, you're at least able to see how are you distributing it in your body. So what are the cons? There's room for error again with the tape measure. And, are you getting it parallel to the floor at the right spot pre and the post when you do it? So tips, again, just back to, we do it 3 times really to get a little bit more accurate each time. And the more expert you are in doing it, the better off you're going to be. So that means the more reps, keep practicing. All right. Next, I'm going to give you 3 ways to measure fat and body composition that require equipment. So first of all, there is underwater weighing. I'm talking the expensive equipment, special equipment. And I've been asked before, can't you just do that in the swimming pool? Well, no, you can't. So this is called hydrostatic weighing. And this is known, or was known, back in the day. And I can now say I was here back in the day. It was still known as the gold standard when I was going to school, to college in like 1982 to 1986 when I graduated. And it was known as the gold standard, or one of the most accurate ways to measure body fat until newer, more advanced ways were developed. And I've been in that deep tub numerous times myself, and I have tested hundreds, if not thousands, of students, faculty, and staff this way. The number of times that I have shouted in this very tiny room, blow it out, blow it out, blow all the air out, to the tune of a sore throat during those days, during those weeks we were testing, to some submerged student, I won't call a victim, and lost my voice doing it. And that brings back so many memories. It was never foolproof though. And it's hard to be underwater, get all of your air out, because we have an innate desire not to do that. We like to breathe. We like oxygen. So you and I don't like to have no air in our lungs. It's very difficult to get a true measure. And with antiquated scales that are used above that. So that's like, imagine a huge scale and the needle is bouncing all over, because while you're underwater blowing out air, you're also wiggling a little bit. And these scales were bouncing around all the time. And I would have to say to the students, other students in the room, I'd say, keep an eye on this. I want to know exactly why, because that person underwater does not want to do it again, like a 4th time or 5th time. Get this right. And, I had to relay that because we did not want them to come up and say, we didn't get it. Could you do it again? Right? Because they're so uncomfortable. And, but that was one of the mistakes. Now, when they became digital, things get a little bit better that way. But that was one of the huge issues with it. So you're trying to read it while somebody is wanting desperately to get back up and take a breath, and it's moving all over. If you ever have a chance to do this, take a pass. It's based on Archimedes' principle. The amount of liquid a submerged object displaces is equivalent to the volume of the objects. We take a measure on land, we take a measure underwater, and we measured with an elaborate calculation your body density. That's what we end up getting from those 2 measures. From that body density, we calculate the body fat. And I imagine all of my students, I could see them still sitting in the lab trying to do that calculation and, staying late afterward because they still couldn't get it. The heavier you are underwater, relatively, the lower your body fat, because we've always said this, right? Muscle is more dense than fat. Muscle will weigh more than fat. Fat floats. So the pros to underwater hydrostatic weighing, it's safe, or can be used if you have a pacemaker, right? Which other bioidentical, or I'm sorry, not bioidentical. How often do I say that? Too often. Bioelectrical impedance, same start, different ending, is not doable. You can't use it for the pacemaker. And it can be more accurate than other available methods of measuring, but that's only if you've got some expertise and comfort level in the water. The cons are it's never going to be accurate if you can't get the air out of your lungs. You'll measure fatter than you actually are if you still have air in your lungs. The range of error was always about 2 to 3% plus or minus. But again, that's only if we're confident everybody got the air out and the scale was holding still and. You get the idea. Next step, be thankful you didn't have to do that. Skinfold calipers. So this is known as the pinch test. In labs, we would also do this one most commonly. So at the beginning of the semesters, the end of the semesters that I described to you, whether it was for undergrads, grad students, or it was for staff, faculty, and alumni that came to the exercise clinic. We would do this one regularly. I have pinched a lot of fat, thousands of skin folds in my career, and yet few in the last 10 years since I left the university setting. I no longer teach students how to use Skinfold calipers, pre and post test students each semester, or work in the exercise clinic at the university. But we also, however, did do them selectively for people in the fitness center. But it had to be a certain level or weight a person. So if you are really a heavy set person with considerable amount of weight to lose, the accuracy of a skin fold measurement was not going to be very good, and potentially when you post tested was going to be better because you'd lose weight and we would be able to get a reading. And that would show us that potentially it would look like you were more fat because we couldn't get the skin when you begin. And then we could get a piece of skin because you've lost some weight. It wasn't as tight and taut, but that's like a false positive number. So not ideal. And it takes 5,000 repetitions to even get accurate at doing it. So if you are having some student do that for you, some brand new, relatively young trainer, or not necessarily young trainer, I mean wet behind the ears trainer, it's in their first few months, it's in their first 6 months, it's in their first year, unless they're doing repetition after repetition in huge groups of people, skinfold testing day after day after day, they can't get good at it. It's just it's a crapshoot. So it's probably not worth the discomfort. And there's discomforts. I bruised a lot of people depending on your delicacy of your skin. So the pros, it's relatively accessible in fitness centers and university settings. The cons are it all depends on your administrator skill level. Again, 5,000 practices to be an expert in anything. Some who will say 10. But if you have a newer, younger trainer testing you, chances are that accuracy is going to be lower in the 3 to 4% accuracy that is possible. Next is a DEXA scan. So we're talking expensive equipment, no kidding, right? Or an MRI, a CT scan. When you can get that bone density test done, be sure your technician knows you'd like to know your percent body fat because they can tell you. They can tell you various tissues, including not only your bone, but muscle and fat. So be sure to ask if you've recently had a bone scan. You also had one of the most accurate ways to measure your body fat. The pros are it's non-invasive. There is no pinching. There is no submerging underwater. And it's an accurate measure, the most. You may have already had or be in need of a bone scan, so good timing. And the cons are it's expensive, right? If you don't have other need, they're probably not going to do this just for your body fat unless they're engaging you in a study. And it's kind of like a payback for doing that. It's generally just used for research. So next up, I want to share with you some newer and most accessible ways to measure fat and benchmark your projects or your progress. And that would be bioelectrical impedance. So I'm going to talk handheld, and you may be familiar with these. So handheld bioimpedance kind of look like you're grabbing almost, was it? Looks like a drone maybe, but you're holding on to it. You're sending a electrical signal from one arm to the other through your body. And it's based on the fact that fat is a poor conductor of electricity. Water is a good conductor, and we store the majority of our water in our muscles. So hydration, therefore, is important. If you're not hydrated, if you're dehydrated, you're going to test as if you had a greater percent fat. Now, notice what I said. That doesn't mean if you're dehydrated, you have more fat. It just means you're not accurately able to measure the amount of muscle you have. It's not showing up because you're dehydrated. So handheld tools used in fitness centers are probably far less accurate than many methods of testing. But that said, there's more to consider. So the pros are it's easy, it's non-invasive, there is no dunk tank, no bruises from skin folds. The cons are the accuracy is based again on hydration. Handhelds are less likely to be sensitive, and error messages are really common if you're a larger size person with a high percent of body fat. So it doesn't work accurately for everybody. And I've noticed that, these little handheld devices are anywhere from $50 to $60 when I was the purchasing agent for our members and testing. And, you're not going to get a great deal of accuracy with that with something used frequently. A smart scale is next, in one of the things that I recommend that every household have. As of the pandemic, we just need to know the pros. The smart scale, by the way, it's another form of bioelectrical impedance. You're standing on it. And if you go to a fitness center, you generally will do standing on and holding on. So now we've got probably a more accurate overall read of right arm, left leg, torso, whole 9 yards. Standing on one, is there probably a loss as we go upstairs? Holding on to one, is there a loss as we go downstairs? Probably in both cases, this would be true. So the pros for a smart scale is affordable. There are a great deal of price ranges, by the way. I'll put links in the show notes to 3 different budget-wise scales that I recommend in my Amazon store. It's convenient to have at home. It's non-invasive. You can't feel a thing. It takes seconds. The ability to measure and show change over time is great. The cons are it is dependent again on your hydration, and accuracy is lower probably than some other methods, but this is the one that I prefer. And truly think that it's change. So again, is the calibration perfect? And I know often members in our community get all caught up with, is that right? And that's really not the problem. That's not really the beneficial piece of information you want. So what if it is right that yes, you are obese by that reading, 31% is obese. The thing you want to pay attention to is when you get on it again in 6 weeks, has it changed? Because you're not going to do anything different than you did yesterday. You can't go back to yesterday. If it's 31 right now, it is. We just know. Now we're empowered. So you're looking at change, and whether it's absolutely perfect, we will never know that. But you can know, was it measuring you at a specific date and time in a specific status? So important, and by status, I mean certain level of hydration, certain level of sleep, certain level of not exercising that day. So why are these ways to measure fat so important and so beneficial? You want to measure fat to optimize habits that influence your body composition. Your measures all tell you the sum of your daily habits. You know when you measure not if, but how they're working. You know something isn't working. You may not know exactly what it is, but you have a measure so that you can look at whether you are eating enough high quality protein. You're exercising to keep and gain lean muscle and avoid losing it, whether you are sleeping enough, whether you're not allowing catabolic hormones or lack of anabolic hormones to sabotage you. For help with any of those, if you have 20 or more pounds to lose, I'm going to have you click the button in the show notes to learn more about FitU. I have gathered all the science of fitness and fitness nutrition after menopause for you. All right, what are you waiting for? It is time to start flipping 50 for sure. And I want you to come to the show notes and reread. Potentially, if you like to read as opposed to listen, that's all you've done, which is fantastic. But the show notes for this one will be at flipping50.com/measure fat. And what are you waiting for? The world needs you healthy now more than ever. Let's start flipping 50 today.